In this episode, we take up Firefly, episode 5, Safe. Megan, where do you want to start with around episode 5, Safe?
Ooh, this was a fun episode. We got some big mysteries revealed, and what I thought was the most interesting about the episode Safe was the overarching theme of contrast in the different relationships that Simon has encountered throughout his life. What were some of your big themes?
The intoleration of religion is something that I have thought about for many years. And we certainly saw that here. We did get a lot of backstory with River, so that was cool. I loved the dance scene, and I'm not sure we'd seen her smile that much. Mal once again proves himself to be a complete jerk early on in town. And boy, how much more are you intrigued about the preacher now?
Who is Sheppard Book?
Yeah, who is Sheppard Book? He reminds me of, and I just forgot his name, but my favorite character on Deep Space Nine was the tailor.
Garick!
Yes, and I'm beginning to wonder if he's Garick.
Maybe. Of course, Garick was so wonderful as, who, me? A humble tailor? How could I be a terrorist international spy?
And part of the reason I loved Garick even more is, and this is a little before your time, but the very first Dirty Harry movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Andy Robinson, who played Garick, played a complete whack job in that movie. A complete whack job. And he was great. So that I've got that whole backstory in my head. It's when the first Iron Man came out, you had the whole backstory. The actor in your head as a drug addict and insane anyway. But Andy Robinson played this. He even said the guy was a whack job. But then Garick, I loved Garick, and he was so devious, the humble tailor.
Oh, he's a big
and I'm beginning to
too.
think,
absolutely,
yeah. With the Sheppard Book, I'm beginning to wonder. I'm beginning to see connections there. But
we know from past episodes that Sheppard Book can fight. He's really observant. He's got a keen strategic mind, but we don't know any details.
And I wish they would have given us a little more detail of what was on that identity card.
Touch, right?
Yeah. We're at the cattle pen. They're trying to sell the cattle. First, the buyers want to stiff them. That's, I just think, all part of the negotiation. And we had seen the sheriff and his deputies in town. It was unclear what they were going to do in town, whether they were after Mal and crew or other, and it turns out they were after other, who, of course, were the buyers of the cattle. It had to be a pretty difficult situation for Mal, and certainly was for Sheppard, since he got shot, and for Jane. When people are shooting around you, you tend to shoot back. So lots of, yes, especially if you're Jane. So lots of self-control there by those two. So we get through that scene, and that was just, for me, fun, because that was just big action. And then on the kidnapping and town scene, the dance scene, you're absolutely right, was just gorgeous. Great dancing. I didn't know until I read a little bit after I watched it that she's actually a professionally trained dancer, the actress who plays River. And then kidnap, and they go to the town. And maybe why don't you pick it up there, and how did you assess your emotional roller coaster through that part of it?
I will, and my emotional roller coaster started a little bit when River started dancing, because as you mentioned at the time, it was gorgeous, and it was another really example of her picking things up unbelievably quickly. She had presumably never seen this dance before on this planet that has really interesting, strange traditions, and she just was able to join them after watching for a moment, and this look of just must have been like the child she was before all of these terrible things happened to her. And then, of course, they're kidnapped. And it was a really interesting kidnapping, because surface level, kidnapping is wrong, you shouldn't do it. But if a town is in need of a doctor and you've got a lot of sick people, and then a doctor is dumped in your lap and made available, They were very welcoming to their prisoners and very friendly at first. So I had mixed feelings about it. And I really loved that whatever the situation was, however he had gotten into that situation, Simon's just roll up the sleeves, let me get to work. If I'm here, I'm going to help the people. And I thought that was a wonderful testament to his character. And I loved the kind of the nurse or the kind of medical practitioner who had been taking care of people. I thought she came off at first so sweet and was describing a life that seemed so idyllic. And it's, I wouldn't mind having that kind of life and that kind of community. And then it all went terribly awry.
So I didn't appreciate that Simon wanted to stay, and he thought that was maybe a place of refuge for he and River. Did you get that sense from him?
I kind of got the sense that it had never really occurred to him that sort of thing might be an option. And I think what they were presenting was something that was so appealing to him and what he was looking for. And I think that a woman had made the pretty good point is if you don't know where home is, why not here? That's a fair point for people who are on the run and who need to stay hidden in a very small, out-of-the-way place. I think it probably woke up something in him a little bit to be like, oh, maybe I would like this. Yeah, and that's part of the contrast, I think, that's coming along a little bit later.
I guess I got the sense that would be a terrible place to hide because he would stick out so much like a sore thumb.
That's a good point.
And other villages would hear about the doctor, and the word would get out that a doctor has appeared. And since I assume the Alliance knows he's a doctor, they're looking for a doctor, that might stick out. But then we get to the American Puritan intolerance of the witch burning.
I've got written in my notes, what a quiet, safe place where people take care of. It's so nice. It's like a dream life. Oh, until the witch fever. Too much religion is bad for people.
So
a little religion can be great for people. Too much is almost never good.
So in America, every high school, or at least before Trump, every high school read a play called The Crucible.
So good. And a movie with Winona Ryder. Killer.
And the play was written by Arthur Miller in the 50s as an allegory to the McCarthy witch hunts, except this was the Salem witch trials. And the women who were burned at the stake, one husband was crushed under stones.
Some and men so too, I think.
And so that sort of intolerance is imprinted on the American mind at quite an early age. So I was able to draw a lot from that. I thought when she first read the thoughts of the mute girl, they were going to say she was touched and that she would have been seen as an angel or something along those lines, but obviously not.
Could have gone two ways really easily. And I thought it was so interesting they went right to witch and then can't suffer a witch to live and then burn the human alive. And that really made me think, just as part of a world building type thing, how long have these colonies been established and how long do you think it would realistically take to develop a culture so different from the one that you came from?
Maybe it wasn't different from the one they came from.
Maybe it wasn't that different than the one they came from. Because I guess I assume like our current reality, especially, and by and large, we've moved past the burning of the humans, at least in the Western world, for the most part.
Somewhat.
But yeah.
Now we've just moved to guns. So I don't hold much hope out there. But what did you think of Simon and his decision to die with his sister?
I thought it was lovely. It was a beautiful moment of them. And I think because we held these flashbacks throughout the episode of them growing up and again being let down by their parents, by their blood family. And he had the kind of relationship with River, the kind that I think was almost offered by this community and the kind he didn't realize he had on Serenity. And he's like, if this is the only really true relationship that I have in my life, we're going to end it together. I thought it was a lovely action. What did you think?
I thought so as well. I was actually quite proud of him. I had saw that coming, but it made perfect sense to me. It made perfect sense. Although I'm sure he intended it as a threat, I took it as much, much deeper and saw and heard what you saw and heard. And he was just going to wrap himself around her and die with her. So I found that very moving. I skipped over a part I wanted to jump back to,
sure,
which was after Book was shot on the planet and they take him up to the Serenity and they do a field dressing and some stabilization. What did you think of Mal's decision to leave immediately?
That was a rough one. That was a rough one. I honestly, in watching it, I glossed over it a little bit because I jumped, at least in my mind, right to when their very immediate need for a doctor to save Book. They were almost in the choice of, do we get Sheppard Book to medical attention, or do we risk Alliance capture and rescue Simon and River? And he made the objectively sensible choice to get out of Dodge, save the rest of his crew, and try to save Sheppard Book. But it was a rough choice.
Okay, back to the burning and the stake.
We're back. Well, during that interlude, of course, they do make this. Inara actually puts in Mal's head that they go to the Alliance for medical help. And that was really interesting, because that's when that moment you mentioned with the ident card came up. And
right.
Book was immediately given the very best of care for reasons unknown.
They go back to the planet and...
Because of course they do.
Because of course they do. But that was not the language and the emotion I was sensing from Mal when they left. I thought, okay, we've left them and they're just going to have to stay there. But he did go back. So I was obviously pleased about that. And we saw a little growth from Mal, I thought.
I think so too.
What were your thoughts around that?
I just loved the moment because they come in and they're like, what are we for stopping this? We're big damn heroes. That's right, we are. And yeah, she's a witch, but she's our witch. And I thought it was the third type of interpersonal relationship that I thought was really demonstrated in this episode. So there was the village community, which was very close and safe and protective of each other, but extremely intolerant of any divergence. Then there was River and Simon's blood family, who just ultimately weren't that close. And ultimately the ties between parent and child were not that strong. And then you had the very accepting, almost black and white, you're a member of my crew, therefore we save you and your family. I thought just the contrast of those kind of three types of belonging or supposed belonging was extremely fascinating and well presented.
And of course they cavalry rides in over the hill, save the day, get them out, and they are off for a new adventure.
Off for a new adventure.
I guess that brings us to the end. So I am Tom Fox.
And I'm Megan Doherty. See you next time.
This is Tom Fox again. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Because That's What Heroes Do. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review wherever great podcasts are listened to. Because That's What Heroes Do is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.